Hey guys, it is Jeremy again. Welcome back to Books and Coffee, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the popular books and authors that I will never be reading. Now I know that this is kind of subjective because, there's the very popular phrase, never say never, you never know what'll happen. But the very overall consensus of this is it's just not going to happen, and I've really grown into the kind of reader I know I am. I know what I like to read and what I don't. I am a very picky reader, as I think most of us are. So I have a list of books and authors that I just have no intention of reading. Some of these are series, and some of these are flat-out authors. No matter what they put out, it is just not going to happen. So I'm just going to go down my list that is written out on my piece of paper here, and some are authors. So the first 5 or few are authors. So the first one, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid right off and go, and this might get me some hate by some people, but I'm going to go to the King of Horror and say I will never read anything by Stephen King. There is nothing, I don't have anything against Stephen King as a person. I think he is an amazing human being. I definitely follow a lot of, him on, social media, or, sometimes I do, and things like that. But a lot of his books really fit into the genre of horror, and I don't do horror. I don't watch horror movies. I definitely don't read horror books. The biggest reason because of that is just a lot of their stories and a lot of Stephen King's writing in general, especially, he writes books that are this big. For example, Under the Dome, It, The Stand. Those 3 novels, I know for a fact, all 3 of those books are well over 1,000 pages long. I read about anywhere between 300 to 500 pages of Under the Dome. I read this years ago, so I don't remember exactly where I got. But literally, the first several hundred pages of that book was nothing but it set up the basics of the story, and a little bit of the characters, and literally nothing happened for almost 500 pages, or at least not enough happened. For me, that was definitely one of those books that should never have been a standalone. That should have been split right down the middle and have been like a duology. I could say the same thing for The Stand and It. I just don't think those books should have been that long. That's just my personal opinion. I don't understand why you would want to write a book that's so long like that. That's just my personal opinion. I don't really read I've never read a book that's 1,000 pages before. In fact, the longest book I've ever read, still to this very day, is Breaking Dawn, which comes in at 754 pages. It's not that I don't like long books, sometimes it just doesn't happen. That might change with Queen of Air and Darkness. That's a really huge book. But anyway, so nothing really against Stephen King in general. His books and his writing doesn't appeal to me. So moving on, we're going to also go to Nicholas Sparks, which is a very well-known and very beloved romance author. He has written a lot of his books have been adapted into films. 2 of my favorite movies that is based off his books are The Notebook, of course, because I'm really not original. Everyone loves The Notebook practically, as well as A Walk to Remember. I think that story was also quite beautiful. And, I will always love those films, but I will never read any of his books. His books are I'm sorry to say this, his writing is very generic. It's very dry. It's very tasteless. It's very unoriginal in terms of writing style. His stories and characters may sound absolutely amazing, but his writing, for me, just doesn't work. It doesn't click with me. I found it to be very dry and tasteless, in my personal opinion. So no offense. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say this. If I, talk badly about your favorite book or author, it's really, try not to take it personally. We all love and dislike different things. I have tried reading almost every author on here, so I would not be talking about this without having read any of their work. Or at least attempted to read their work, or at least read a little bit of their stuff. So next one we're going to go to is Angie Thomas. I read her debut novel, The Hate You Give, when it came out a couple years ago, and it just didn't really work with me. I found a lot of problems with it. The writing felt very disjointed. I I liked the message of the novel, and I felt the message of the novel was very, very important, but I did not really appreciate a lot of the lack of consequences that the characters should have faced. You know, if one side's going to have consequences, your side should also have consequences, because we don't live in, well, that's just my opinion. And her new book that's called On the Come Up just doesn't really interest me, and I don't know, and it really just boils down to her writing. Her writing, and just really isn't for me. A wonderful human being, and I definitely support her, and I wish her all the best in the world. And I do actually want to watch the Hey You Give movie. I want to see how different the film is compared to the book, or maybe it's a perfect adaptation. I've heard it's really, really, really faithfully adapted, so maybe I won't like it because I didn't really like the book. Who knows? Next one is Sarah J. Maas. Doesn't really surprise a lot of people that I would bring up a Sarah J. Maas Sarah J. Maas on this list. I read her A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin. And I really didn't like that series at all. To me, when I think of fairies, I think of things like the Iron King series by Jolikigawa. That's what I think of as really well-written fae, in my opinion. It was just, I loved that world. So reading a fae world that's very high fantasy was very different for me. And if it would have stayed a standalone, if A Court of Thorns and Roses would have been a one-book thing and that's it, I probably would have loved it. And I probably would have even given it, like, maybe even a 4 out of 5. But since to me, there's just too many things that just bothered me. So that entire trilogy ended up becoming a 1-star for me. I did not like the first-person writing. I've said many times, if that trilogy was written like the Throne of Glass series, I probably would have liked it a lot more, because I feel like third person really clicks with epic fantasy a lot more than first person does. That, and it really boils down to, I did not like Feyre, and I did not like Rhysand. I thought Tamlin was a much better character. And yes, he does horrible things, but he's human, and it felt realistic to do horrible things, and so, yeah. And when it comes to Throne of Glass, that series is just a little bit too overhyped for me. I've always kind of wanted to read it, but there's like 8 books. Technically, there's like 8 books. There's a prequel novella book that leads right up to where the first book ended, or the way the prequel ends is immediately where the first book begins. And I just don't feel like I have the energy to read 8 very long books. I think starting with like books 4 all the way through 7, they're like 600 page plus. So just not really something that I want to invest my time in. But then again, this is never say never. I might pick out I do have the first Throne of Glass book on my Kindle, so I may pick it up one of these days, but it's probably not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's probably not. Yeah, so next one is I actually lied. This is actually the only author on here. It's the last author that's listed that I actually haven't read their books, and then there's some series that I haven't. And that is the author known as Tristina Wright, who wrote a book that is called 27 Hours. It was originally, I believe, supposed to be the first book of a trilogy, and this series was canceled because, for one, a lot of queer people found a lot of problematic elements throughout her novel, as well as the author is just not a very nice person. She is very known for her bullying other readers who do not believe exactly what she believes. She was one of the people that very much boycotted Carve the Mark, The Black Witch, Sad Perfect, The Continent. All those supposedly problematic novels were she said some really horrible, very mean, very vindictive things to a lot of people online, and I think that had a lot to do with why her series was canceled. It's really sad because I've actually kind of gone online and I've looked at the sample, and it does look like a very fun novel, but once again, even if I was willing to separate the art from the artist in this situation. I don't like starting a book where I'm not going to know what's going to happen with the rest of the story, so I don't want to invest my time in reading a 400-page novel where I'm never going to find out what's going to happen next. And it's just really hard to support someone who bullies and attacks people for having different opinions on problematic books, or supposedly. So it just, like, my morals and my principles, I just can't in good conscience support someone like that. So I'm just not going to read anything that she puts out. The next book I'm not really going to be reading, mainly because it's just been out for so long, and I wanted to read it for so long, and my interest in it is just not there. And that is a book called The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, which is a book that is narrated by death, and it takes place during World War II, where all books are, like, burned or something like that. I have the movie. I've yet to watch it, but it's just not a book I want to read. I might read some of his future works, but that one is just a little bit too overhyped for me. The next one is a series, and I think the rest of these are series now, and that is the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. It was once a trilogy, and the author decided to expand that after the series was over for like years, like 4 or 5 years or something, and then the author decided to release a 4th book out of nowhere. Why? I really don't know. It's really weird, and I think it's funny that if you look up this online, Ransom Riggs, which is the author, is married to fellow author Tara Maffei, and both of them are YA authors. Both of them had trilogies that were complete, and both of them decided to write more in both of their corresponding series. So both of them were trilogies that both turned into 6-book series. Coincidence? Really don't think so. It's just a little fishy to me. I mean, maybe they needed the money, or I don't know, but from what I've heard, like, Ignite Me was a great book that ended the Shatter Me series, and I think Library of Souls ended the Miss Peregrine's Children series really well. But mainly, my main reason why I'm not going to be reading the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series is because it is just a way too overhyped. People recommend it, and I was really looking forward to this because it was a young adult series that was in a male's first-person narrative. It's very rare to find in YA to have to find a series that is completely written in a male's point of view. It's just kind of sad because I've read a little bit of it, and the writing is very well written and seems fun, but it's just a little too overhyped. And when people were recommending it, say, well, if you don't read this, you don't know what a good book is. I'm like, ooh, don't say that. Don't talk about it like that, because you'll just end up talking me out of reasons why I'm never reading it. I'm kind of one of those people. If you shove it in my face enough, I'm not going to want to read it. It's the same thing. I used to tell my sister all the time, because she used to rant about the Vampire Diaries TV show. She loved it so much. She would talk about the storyline, the characters, certain things. Is Elena is going to become a vampire? Who's going to end up together? All these kinds of things. And then we would talk about, the witchcraft and magic of the show and just all those things. And I wasn't a watcher of the show at that point, and I literally said, if you ever want me to watch the show, you have to stop talking about it. Because when you hear it so much, it gets really stale and boring. Anyway, next one I have is kind of a little bit sad, is the Castor Chronicles series, also known as the Beautiful Creature series by Cayman Garcia and Margaret Stoll. I owned this entire series in gorgeous hardcovers. They were beautiful, and they sat there for like 3-4 years. And I picked it up, I would read a little bit of it, put it down, read it, put it down. The furthest I ever got into the first book was about 200 pages, and I loved the southern part of the story. I loved that it was set in the deep south. Everything down to the sweet tea is the same. I just loved it. I loved the story of it because I have seen the movie many, many, many times, and I do think it does have a great story. it's not that it's overhyped. I just don't have any interest in picking up that series, and it was one of the series I needed to get out of my library. My library has had like several like axes to cut it. I've gotten rid of a lot of books, but I've also got gave a lot of my books to my friends who are now reading the same books I had, and they're like, "I'm so happy you gave me this series." Like I actually unhauled the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor, and one of my friends read that entire trilogy, and she's like, "You need to read these. They are so good." And maybe someday, I don't know, I haven't really decided, but it's just not going to happen for me. The next one is one I know it's not going to happen. Excuse me, is going to be the House of Night series by PC and Kristen Cast. This series is very long. The original House of Night series was 12 books. Then they have this new series that they're writing currently, which is planned to be 4 books. 2 are out, and the 3rd one comes out in 2020. And now I found, and then recently there is going to be a TV show based off of this series. And it's, to me, they never wanted all these books. That was not what they wanted, but they had a very strict contract with their publishing company. And the series was very hot. It was paranormal. It was vampires. It was a very unique world from what I understood. I never read the series, so I can't really say. The closest thing I ever did was I read the graphic novel called Legacy, which kind of, I liked what they did with vampires. It was a very unique premise, but I cannot devote that many books. Let's see, that's going to be what? 16 novels. 16 novels, not even counting the novellas, because I would want to read those as well. So it's just not going to happen. I might read books of like new series or something by them, but that series is just way too long, and I've had way too many people tell me that it's just not a good series, and it really feels like it was milking it. But then again, I don't think they were. I think they basically were forced to make the series this long, because I think originally they only wanted the series to be 6 books, and each book was going to be like 400 or 500 pages. But things happen especially when series get really popular. That series was published during the Twilight craze, and when it sells really, really well, the publisher wants to cash in on the popularity. So I can kind of understand why they wanted the series to be so long. Anyway, the next one is the Selection series by Kira Cass. It looks like hot garbage. It sounds like hot garbage. Like every YA trope you can possibly imagine. Bland, tasteless characters, a really fluffy, fun, easy style of writing, and I had them for years. I'm never gonna read them. I haven't even owned them for a couple of years now. It's just not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen for me. The story. People said it's like a blend of The Bachelor with like a dystopian layover of Hunger Games, but I just no. It's literally like a reality TV show soap opera and I'm just not here for that. Absolutely not. The last one on my list is going to be on the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. I had the first book. I think I read a couple pages of it. The writing seemed very fun, and from what I've heard, it's like a blend of fantasy and dystopian, which is that's really unique and interesting, but it's not at all something that I would want to read for myself. And I've been told that it feels like we've already there's a lot of things in there that you've read before, especially a lot of apparently there's a lot of things from a lot of other dystopians, and the world building isn't really creative. And I've also been told that it is practically a complete ripoff of Red Rising by Pierce Brown, which I do want to read that one. That one sounds really good. So yeah, this is my video for today. Very unplanned. Normally I don't film on Saturdays, but yeah, so this is my, these are the popular books and authors that I have no intention of reading. It's mainly series, but still. This is a video I've been wanting to do for a while, and now I can finally kind of do it. It's really fun, and at the end of the day, we can love and, you know, whatever we want. So I hope you're not too upset that I maybe talk about your favorite author or your favorite series. But I think we all kind of know that, you know, life's too short to hold on to books that we might someday, I might read that author, or I might read that series. You know, there's just too much, you know, life isn't forever. This life is it definitely isn't forever, and I want to spend my time reading something that I know I'm going to enjoy, and not hold on to books where it's, I might read that someday. That was the biggest reason why I held on to a lot of books for so long. That it was one of those things where I might continue that series, or I might read that someday. You know, the covers are really pretty, and that's why I held on to a lot of books, such as Beautiful Creatures, such as Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Ooh, nope, there's one more series I actually forgot, and that is the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, which is Shadow and Bone is book 1. I have every intention to read the Grisha Trilogy, and probably King of Scars as well, but I have very little interest in the Grisha books. That trilogy is so overhyped, and I'm just not interested in anything that is there. Everyone always tells me that you should read that series before reading Six of Crows, but one of my very good friends is reading Six of Crows, and she was not confused whatsoever, so I'm just going to trust her, because she's normally pretty on top of things when it comes to that. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you thought of the books and authors that I will not be reading. What are some of your books and authors that you will not be reading? And let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to kind of discuss more of that with you guys. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.